the states to start resuming some semblance of normal business, I think it's only appropriate that we get regular order up here in the Senate.
And Congressman Mike McCaul.
They're not only blaming the United States military, Eric, for creating the virus, which we all know is false, but they're also going on our own platforms, social media platforms in the United States, spreading the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda.
Plus, former Deputy National Security Advisor KT McFarland is here.
They start tricking you, they seize your documents, and it goes on and on and on, abuse of power. The difference, Eric, though, is with General Flynn, they blackmailed him too.
I'm also talking with the communications director for Trump's 2020 re-election campaign, Tim Murtaugh. That and so much more.
And here's a new trick, Mr. Knox. It's called Socks on Chicks and Chicks on Fox.
Right now in America This Week. Welcome to America This Week. I'm Eric Bolling, coming to you from inside Haven Hair and Skin Salon near Charleston, South Carolina. Now, this place, like so many, was forced to close their doors, and believe me, we miss them. Now, don't lie. We know some of you have done some at-home haircuts. Check this one out. Better leave that to the professionals, as they say. In any case, we're here and will always be here to keep pressing our leaders for answers during the crisis. Now, pull up a chair, boys and girls, moms and dads. I want to tell you a little story. Once upon a time, there were two superpowers left in the world, the U.S. and China. The U.S. was a massive economic and military country fueled by free markets, liberty, capitalism, and freedom. China was massive in size. Their population was 4 times that of the U.S., but unlike America, China was communist. The government was involved on all things Chinese. But because the free markets in America allowed people to work harder, earn more, innovate, and get ahead, competition made the U.S. stronger and more powerful than China. You see, under communism, people worked for the good of the government, not for themselves nor their families. Now, China was always jealous of the U.S. and wanted to be number one, but the United States was never that worried about China. But China grew stronger and bigger. As China grew bigger and stronger, they became bolder. Against the wishes of just about every country in the world, China built a massive military base in international waters in the South China Sea. But the U.S. was never really worried about China. One day, America elected a new president who promised to put America first on all negotiations. The new president cut new trade deals with Mexico, with Canada, and with European countries. Now, next was China. The new president warned China that if they didn't respect the United States, they were going to be next. But China continued to cheat America on trade. After all, for decades, the U.S. never really worried about China. Now, this is where the story gets a little weird. Just as the new president was about to clamp down on China for cheating on trade, in fact, right in the middle of that big trade deal that was sure to bring China down a notch and bring the U.S. back up, something inexplicable happened, something no one could imagine. A virus leak. Now, not just any virus, a virus so deadly you could get infected and die just by being near someone who had it. This virus spread like wildfire across the land. First Italy, then Spain, and finally the virus made it to the U.S. The United States was ravaged. Their superpower economy shut down, halted, just to stop the virus from wiping out the population. Trillions of American money was wiped out instantly. Worse than that, protective masks were unavailable. Hand sanitizer, empty. People died. Thousands each day in America. But folks, listen to this. That deadly virus was traced back to China. And to make matters worse, while the virus was leaking from China around the world to unsuspecting countries, China was quietly buying up all the masks, all the gloves, and all the medical supplies everywhere in the world. China was lying to the world, saying the virus wasn't that bad, nothing to worry about, and still, the U.S. wasn't that worried about the China virus. The United States suffered badly, far worse than China. When it was all over, 100,000 died in America. In China, less than 10,000. You see, China lied, and Americans died. Now, thanks for listening to my story, folks. I know what you're saying. Mr. Bolling, you've been telling the same story every week for 2 months. Now, while that's true, folks, If it's getting repetitive, I apologize. I just wanted to remember, everyone to remember the story about how China is willing to do anything and everything to be number one. Now, let's hope our leaders see what we've been talking about right here for a long time. Joining me now is North Carolina Senator Thom Tillis. Senator, I should say welcome back, but how does it feel to return to the swamp, sir?
Well, I think it's good to be back. We had a Judiciary Committee this morning. We've heard a circuit court judge that will report out of committee. We've got Senate Armed Services Committee. Look, if we're encouraging the states to start resuming some semblance of normal business, I think it's only appropriate that we get a regular order up here in the Senate.
Yes, sir. Can you update us, Senator, since the last time you were here? You were here a couple of weeks ago, several weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago, and we were talking about China, and I've been staying on China's role and responsibility in the coronavirus and spreading this pandemic across the globe. Tell us what you know. Bring us up to speed.
Well, I think there's increasing evidence. First, we know that the virus started in China. We know that the Chinese Communist government hid the information from their own population and from the rest of the world. There's increasing suspicion that it was accidentally released from a laboratory. We've got investigations doing that. And there's also, I think, a groundswell of American sentiment that we can no longer rely on China to be the primary producer of so many critical products that we need in a time of crisis.
Indeed. And, sir, you know, this week there was a Chinese official, I don't know what level he was at, but I read this, that he was saying that if the world were to come at China and blame them for the coronavirus, especially the United States, that could mean an act of war. Respond to that, if you would.
Well, I think, I believe the ambassador to the U.S. said something similar to that. The best thing that they could do to take some of the heat off of them is take responsibility now. Those sort of threats, I don't think are appropriate for a country who clearly the communist leaders are responsible for the scale of the global pandemic that we're dealing with. So I find it insulting that they would even put that out there. What we're trying to do is recover from damage that they largely caused. They should be having a discussion about how do they better communicate public health risk, how do they do it sooner, and how do they do it honestly.
So the question being, going forward, what does Trump do? Does the Trump administration and does the Senate, support something like increased, let's call tariffs on China? Or do we go so far as to declare China owing us, I don't know, trillions of dollars? What's the next step in getting some retribution from China?
Well, I'll call it restitution, but I think it's along several lines. I think there's a valid argument to be made by many states who were affected by the shutdown orders and their economies being largely shut down. I think the federal government, we passed a $2.8 trillion economic stabilization package only because of the coronavirus. And so I think that those are discussions we're going to have, whether it's tariffs, whether it's long-term onshoring, a lot of the manufacturing jobs in China that put us at risk to begin with, working with our partners to move certain supply chains out of China. All those things are on the table, and it's one of the reasons why we have to be here in Washington, because those are the sorts of policies we need to start moving on now if we're going to be better prepared for the next pandemic.
All right, Senator Thom Tillis, we're going to say thank you for joining us. I know you're very busy back in D.C., tons of votes. Sir, appreciate your time. As always, we'd like to get you back as soon as possible. Thank you. All right, let's bring in Congressman Mike McCaul from Texas, Republican, who was on the show last week, but we want to stay on top of this. Congressman, thank you for joining us. We think you're the right guy to be talking about this, being on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and also having spent some time in Homeland Security on the House side. You have the intel. You're behind the closed doors. I've been pretty hard on China for the last 8 weeks, but I think they deserve it, sir. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. I think China needs to be held accountable for what it did. It was one of the worst cover-ups in human history. Going back to last December, when they arrested, detained the doctors who were trying to warn about this SARS-like virus, which, by the way, the WHO requires that to be reported within 24 hours. But instead, the Chinese Communist Party went in, detained the doctors, got retractions. One of them died from COVID-19. Then they went into the labs and told them to stop testing, and they destroyed all the lab samples, trying to conceal and whitewash that this was taking place. You have to ask yourself, why would they do this? I think they were they didn't want the public to know about it, obviously, and they didn't want the number of cases reported coming out of China. Then you fast forward into January, where it gets really bad. You got Taiwan warning about human-to-human transmission. Even the WHO expert himself warns the WHO that, hey, this thing is transmittable. It's infectious, highly infectious, human-to-human. And instead, the WHO declines to alert the global community. And it went from an epidemic to a pandemic after this spring festival, where you had millions of people traveling out of Wuhan and internationally as well. It could have been stopped, Eric. And the sad thing is, the Chinese Communist Party created this global pandemic. I think they need to be held accountable.
Not only that, they've gone so far as the Chinese Communist Party, as you put it accurately, to have a media campaign to blame the United States, almost poking fun at the United States. I've seen a video. It looks like two Legos talking to each other. One's from China, one's the Statue of Liberty, and they're blaming the United States for us being foolish, putting our head in the sand, that they were trying to warn the world. In fact, it was the opposite. They were trying to hide it from the world, were they not?
They tried to hide this from day one, and they couldn't hide it anymore when it broke outside of China. This disinformation campaign is really it's the worst, because they're not only blaming the United States military, Eric, for creating the virus, which we all know is false, but they're also going on our own platforms, social media platforms in the United States, spreading the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda. We have been in touch with the internet provider, service providers, social media companies to try to get them to take this content off of the internet. If we could take radical jihadist material off when I chaired the Homeland Security Committee, we can certainly take, false propaganda from the Chinese Communist Party down, as I'm the Republican leader on foreign affairs. I'll have a report card coming out pretty soon about it, how effective they've been. But they're using our own First Amendment against us, our own free speech. And in fact, Eric, they kicked our top journalists out of China because they didn't want them reporting the truth.
Yeah, it's amazing exactly what you say. They're using our own First Amendment. I talk about that in the monologue. We kind of looked at China and looked the other way, and maybe it's time to stop doing that. Congressman McCaul, we're going to say thank you to you. We'd love to get you back again. Ranking member on the Foreign Affairs Committee. When we get back up to speed and working in D.C., we want you to be behind those doors fighting for us against China. We'd love to get you back, Congressman. Thank you for your time.
I will, and thank you, Eric. Thank you so much.
She's the former Deputy National Security Advisor for the Trump administration and recently released a new book called Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People. Let's welcome back KT McFarland, a friend of mine for a very, very long time. KT, we'll get to the book in a second. I just want to talk about the news of the week. Some of the information that's come out from the FBI back in the days when General Flynn was under scrutiny. Tell us what you know, what you're hearing.
Well, actually, this is what is in my book in great detail. Look, General Flynn never committed a crime. The FBI tried to trap him, and that's what these recently released notes show. And they were so blatant about it that they actually wrote it down in their own handwriting. They were so confident they would never get caught. The FBI, they railroaded Flynn. They entrapped him. They tried to trick him to say something incorrect, and then they could say, aha, perjury trap. And that's exactly what they did to me, and I write about it at great length in my book. They show up unannounced. They tell you, they imply you don't need a lawyer. They start tricking you. They seize your documents, and it goes on and on and on, abuse of power. The difference, Eric, though, is with General Flynn, they blackmailed him too, because they threatened to charge his son with a crime, and Flynn really sacrificed himself so that his son did not get charged with a crime. And at the end of the day, this wasn't about Flynn. It wasn't even about me. It was about Trump. It was how to get to Trump, how to make sure that the duly elected president of the United States can be brought down by hobnailing his ability to be governing.
You know, KT is so right, and that was what I was going to ask you. Well, you know, to let our audience understand that, did they have some sort of issue with Flynn or you? And it was for Trump. They were trying to take the legs out of Trump from the very beginning. In fact, the people who were involved in this, General Flynn and maybe even yourself, were proven to have some sort of issue with candidate Trump trying to get Hillary elected even before the election. But stay with the tactics a little bit. The FBI tactics. Now, if you've never been visited by the FBI, it's a daunting, it's a scary thing. They'll show up, as you point out, at your front door, knock on your door, invite themselves in. Tell us the tactics again.
Okay, so I had left the White House. I was in my house in Long Island, and I get a phone call on my cell phone. It was a scratchy call, and all I could hear was FBI something something. Well, I assumed it was a typical security clearance investigation. I had 400 people who worked for me, so it would have been normal that the FBI would have followed up on something like that. So I said, well, I can't quite hear you. Can you send me a message? And the FBI agent said, well, we're right outside your door. Why don't you let us in? Stupid me, I trusted the FBI, so I let them in. And I said, well, are you here to investigate me? Do I need a lawyer? And they said, well, we can't tell you not to get a lawyer, but we're really here just to ask some fundamental questions about the transition. Well, just give us a lay of the land, an idea of what went on. And so, Eric, me, little Girl Scout, I thought, well, gee, I want to find out what the Russians did as much as anybody, so I cooperated with them. And what they were doing the whole time was to try to set me up in a perjury trap. Now, what that means is that they had all of my phone calls, logs, text messages, emails, none of which I had access to. And it was like they had the answer key, and they would be looking down, and they would say, well, what about this phone call on the 12th of December at 2 o'clock? And if I got it wrong and said, well, I think actually that was Thursday, not Tuesday, they could jump up and say, well, we think that's a lie. We think that you're trying to evade justice, and we're going to charge you with perjury. Now, the case would never have held up in court, but by threatening to do it, a lot of people at that point, I think, are tempted to just plead guilty to crimes they didn't commit because they know they can go bankrupt having to defend themselves against the FBI. I did not. I refused to plead guilty, and then they implied, well, we'll go away if you implicate Flynn or Trump in some kind of wrongdoing. And I said, no, I won't do that. I'm not going to lie and do that. And knowing full well, Eric, that they could have, you know, kept me in court, bankrupted me, destroyed my career and my reputation, which they pretty much did. But I wasn't going to let them do it to me. And I think in Flynn's case, the difference was they went after his son. And so he pled guilty to crimes he didn't commit either.
You know, it's strong arm intimidation tactics. You're 100% right, and anecdotally, I will tell you the same thing. Got a knock on my door one day, 20 years ago, at doorman building, nonetheless, and the doorman never called and said someone's here for you. Knock on the door, 2 FBI agents kind of invite themselves in. You're nervous, you let them in. They're going after someone else, but they did do the same thing. They ask you a whole ton of questions, and if there's something that's inconsistent, they can use it as leverage to you to turn on someone else. It's incredibly scary and effective. But let me ask you, do you think this came from James Comey? I mean, when FBI agents, someone had to direct them to do this, to go after Trump. Where did that come from?
You know, I've worked in government, in and out of government since the Nixon administration. I was in the Nixon, Ford, Reagan administration before the Trump administration. And Eric, this is not some mid-level guy. I mean, maybe the senior leadership of the FBI wants to say, well, we got rid of the bad guys. It was just a few rotten apples. They're gone now. We've changed the regulations. Don't worry, it'll never happen again. This decision can only have been made at the very top. And here's another thing that happened to me, which I found just as terrifying, is I got a phone call from the Washington Post, or my staff person got a phone call to say, General Flynn had this conversation with the Russian ambassador, and the Washington Post has a transcript of the call. Now, it was so highly classified, I didn't even know a transcript existed. And yet the Washington Post seemed to have a copy. They could only have gotten that from the top.
Thanks, and that's what Trump said. He said, you know, and then Comey himself admitted that he leaked some information that was supposed to be confidential, classified. He leaked it to a friend who leaked it to the New York Times. KT, we're going to say thank you again. Always great having you on. Again, We the People, the book, as KT points out, a lot of this is outlined in her new book. Everyone go out and grab that book. KT McFarland, everybody. Thank you. Now let's go to Liz Bonus. She's the health anchor and medical reporter for Sinclair Station WKRC in Cincinnati for the latest on the pandemic. Now, Liz, thank you for joining us once again. Love having you on. What are some of the issues you're hearing about right about now? I think you have a special interest that you want to bring forward as well.
You know, I certainly do. We are Ohio-based at my station, WKRC TV, and one of the things that we've all been wrestling with as we open the country is how you bring back medical procedures. We've seen all kinds of dangers, people waiting to get heart attack help, waiting to get stroke help because the hospitals, we think, are full of COVID-19 patients, and people are scared to go. Now we're seeing, as we open surgeries, that elective procedures can be done, but not if you have an overnight stay. And I have been following the story of one local woman. Let me tell you, she had a hip surgery with a new joint right before this happened. Surgeries got shut down, and now her hip joint will not stay in place. It pops out every time she tries to do anything if she's not in a full body brace. And she is just praying for the governor to make a medical exception. So yes, we are bringing forward her story to say that some of these electives have now gone to urgent, and it is time that we allow these people to get out of pain and move forward.
Yeah, that's amazing, Liz. Honest, we were in an emergency room, an operating room, I should say, last week with a doctor who was a gastrointestinal doctor, and she said she comes in and does emergency surgeries for people that need it. How is a hip coming out of the joint not considered an emergency? I mean, in Ohio or everywhere?
We asked that same question, and what we were told so far is it's about the overnight stay. You know, that was done originally to keep hospital space open, to prevent the need for PPEs, which we have plenty of supplies right now. And so I've actually elevated her story, and if Governor DeWine, if you are watching this, we need you to get involved. Dr. Amy Atkin is his medical director. We need you to tell these people that their urgent needs are now emergencies and allow the medical teams to perform those surgeries, even if she has to stay overnight in a hospital. This is a mom that takes care of 2 young children, and she can do nothing right now. And you know, we want to take care of the sick. We don't want more people dying, but we have to take care of the well as well.
Yeah, you know, Liz, and again, we appreciate you coming on, and we'll talk to you about some other things, but this is a really important, an important issue, and Governor DeWine should watch the show. We air, as you know, Liz, with Sinclair, we air across the state of Ohio and across the country. DeWine, let's have a medical, I don't know why a hip coming out of a joint is a medical exception. I get it overnight, but this is one of those cases. Liz, you keep us informed. Let us know if you got any relief on that. Liz Bonus, everyone, thank you for your time. Just ahead, we're discussing the path to the president's re-election. Tim Murtaugh with the Trump 2020 campaign joins me. Murtaugh is the communications director for the Trump 2020 re-election campaign. Thank you for being here, Tim. Appreciate your time. You know, tell us what the latest is. I know there's a response. Mourning in America, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G in America, was put out by a bunch of anti-Trumpers, allegedly Republicans. I would call them rhino Republicans. They put it out as a shot against President Trump, a look back at the old Ronald Reagan Mourning in America. Tell us what the response to that ad is.
Well, that's just a scam pack. That's a bunch of bitter, disgruntled Republican, former Republican operatives who are trying to make a buck by just really promoting their anti-Trump hatred. And that ad is just a bunch of bunk, really, because what the president is doing, and the American people can see it, is that he's been focused on two very important responsibilities. The first is to protect the health and safety of the American people, and the second is to safeguard the American economy. You know that this economy was the best in the world. It had reached unprecedented heights before it was artificially interrupted by the coronavirus. President Trump built the economy up to such great heights once, and he is the one to do it a second time. And the alternative is Joe Biden, and his first answer is going to be to raise taxes on this economy and enact the Green New Deal, which would kill jobs. And it's exactly the opposite of what you need to do when you're trying to help revive an economy that's been hit by an outside force like this. And so you see ads like that, and it's really nothing but a bunch of DC Beltway grifters trying to make a buck and, you know, using the hatred of President Trump as their vehicle.
Yeah, Rick Wilson, also Steve Schmidt, if I'm not mistaken, a couple other those who allegedly are Republicans, but really are truly anti-Trumpers. That's what they really are.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely it, and they're inside the Beltway, people who are trying to get rich off of by tapping into donors' donations and running these ads, which are really of poor quality and have no basis in fact or reality. I mean, the reality is, and the American people can see it, President Trump is out leading the country through this crisis, and it's a war against the coronavirus, and the president is leading us in that war. And while the president is doing that, it's interesting to see that Joe Biden, the Democrats, and the media, and some of these never-Trumpers have decided to become the opposition in that war, which is really an incredible place to be for these people. It's actually really sad. It used to be in this country that when we faced a very serious crisis like we are right now, that we united together as Republicans. Well, Joe Biden and his friends and his allies, and these supposedly Republican people would have to be considered Joe Biden's allies, they've thrown that principle out the window. And everything that they're doing is meant to undermine public confidence in what the federal government's response to the virus has been. And that's the opposite of helpful.
You know, I have to point out in our audience now, Tim, mind you, we are across the country, 44 million households, and we're over broadcast television. So it's not a cable network that you're appearing right now. So the people who are watching right now likely haven't picked a side, or if they have, they're certainly not watching TV because they picked a side. And so what we need to point out to them, what I wanted to point out to them with you, Tim, is that look what goes on in the media. President Trump famously said, "I'm a cheerleader for the country." Like him or not, he wants to show the country doing well. On the left, the media, who skews heavily left, took him to task for that. They had a problem with him being a cheerleader for the country. They were almost being cheerleaders for failing drugs. We had hoped that hydroxychloroquine would be a savior. It wasn't. And they're almost cheerleading that fact. And you see these numbers that they point out every day, how many tens of thousands of Americans are dying. It's almost like they want to see a bigger number just because it's President Trump. Please weigh in on that.
Yeah, it's true. I think the Democrats and the media, they're really in the sad position of looking at the world this way, that bad news for America is good news for them. I mean, what a sad position to be in. And you're exactly right. Joe Biden is the same way as with the media, in that if the president says up, they must necessarily say down. Just take a look at the coronavirus and some of the things that the president has said, which are demonstrably true. We know that China is the source and the place of origin of the virus. And when the president points that out and is trying to fight back against the ludicrous Chinese claim that somehow the United States military was responsible for the outbreak in the first place. He called it the Wuhan virus, and he called it the Chinese virus, among other things. And the idea was to pinpoint China as the place of origin and the place where it came from. Joe Biden and the media had a hissy fit and said, "Oh, you can't say that. That's ludicrous. That's fear-mongering. It's xenophobic." I mean, honestly, like you pointed out with the drugs, if the president wants to say reopening the country for the economy, the Democrats and the media, their immediate reaction is, "Oh, you can't do that." And so I really don't think they're interested in progress.
Tim, we have to leave it there. I'm sorry we ran out of time. Tim Murtaugh from the Trump re-election 2020 campaign. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate your time.
Okay, let's bring in both sides of the aisle. Dr. Sebastian Gorka, as you know, back as well. And Amisha Cross from the left, good friends of the show. Love having you every single week. Guys, I'd like to start with something that came out this week in the news, that the New York State has decided to re-up and go back to holding a primary after all. It was the presumptive nominee was Joe Biden. It looked like they were just going to cancel their primary. They changed their mind. Sebastian, I know why. I think Amisha knows why. Why don't you let our audience know why that matters in the election?
Well, this is the party that calls itself the Democrats, and they have some serious credibility issues. If we go back to 2016, we had the superdelegates maneuver whereby Hillary Clinton basically stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders. We're seeing a deficit of democracy. We're seeing a deficit of transparency inside the DNC. And that's the reason why Bernie Sanders refused to even hand out or to give back his delegates to the presumptive putative nominee, Joe Biden. So the idea that they're going to just cancel another primary, I think made enough people, not just the Bernie bros, angry, and they realize they have a serious lack of transparency inside the Democrat Party, and people are worried of the same thing happening again, the nomination being stolen.
Yeah, and Amisha, what does this mean going forward? What does it look like if all of a sudden the primary is held and Bernie has a commanding afternoon?
Don't actually see that happening by any sense of the word. What we've known throughout and what we've seen throughout the Democratic primary in multiple states is that Bernie Sanders simply did not build the coalition, and that coalition did not come out. And that was tested throughout the country. We saw it happen across the South. We also saw it happen across the Midwest. I don't think that was going to change much in New York either.
So, and one of the other stories I wanted to talk about, it's kind of getting lost in the shuffle here. This is very big. General Flynn was basically convicted. He was forced to admit to some things that maybe he wouldn't have admitted to because the FBI, the deep state FBI, was giving him such a hard time. They said they had evidence. Sebastian, in light of the recent findings that have come out of the Comey's FBI, what do you think should happen to General Flynn?
For many months, Eric, people talked about pardoning General Flynn. That's no longer adequate. This man's case has to be thrown out. Two pieces of recent evidence, one even more important than the first one. The first one was these handwritten notes from the former deputy, the third in charge of the FBI, who's in charge of counterintelligence, where they're listing the reasons for interviewing Flynn. And one of them included getting him fired as national security advisor. That's outrageous. That is secret police tactics. The job of the FBI is to investigate crimes, not to get people fired. But even more important is the information that was released by the Department of Justice that 14 days before the inauguration, the FBI was going to close down the investigation of Mike Flynn, saying there's nothing derogatory, there's no crime committed. As it was being closed down, you had Andy Stroke, you had the individual who was key player in all of this, reach in and say, keep that case open. And that's when they set up the frame up of Mike Flynn. This has to be thrown out of the court straight away.
Yeah, thrown out. And also, Amisha, there's some other language in some of these documents that basically said, what do we want to do? Try and get Flynn to lie so that they could, in fact, prosecute him. It really does. You hear these things like, oh, deep state is conspiracy theory. Turns out, Amisha, deep state was real for the beginning of the Trump administration.
I'm not going to take up for the FBI or their conversations because I don't think that that can be done by anyone. And this isn't something that, the FBI doesn't have these conversations regardless of who the victims are. I think that this is across the board, and there's a lot of mistrust in the FBI in general. This does not negate the fact that Michael Flynn lied multiple times, period. That is factual. Or the fact that this president has decided that he is going to use Russia and Russiagate, whatever he wants to call it, over and over and over again to dissuade from the things that he's done since he's been in this office, particularly to move us beyond what's happening now with the coronavirus and a lot of the mishandlings that his administration has had. This is just a timely shift in the news cycle for him.
Guys, I ran out of time, and I'd like to rebut this and go back and forth a little bit. Amisha, I will point out that, if lying were the reason to remove someone from office in D.C. or worse, I don't think we would have a Congress. I don't think we would have a Senate. And we may not have an executive branch as well. We're going to have to leave it right there. Amisha Cross and Sebastian Gorka, thank you guys so much again. Next, from antibody testing to the future of pandemics, Dr. Todd Dorfman is back to answer your questions. Now, over the past few weeks, hundreds, if not thousands of calls have been coming in, and we hear you. Now, keep calling. That number right there, 888-601-0032, is toll-free. Pick up the phone. Tell us what you're thinking. Just rant. You can sound off on anything you want, and we'll make sure they hear you, too. Now, here's what some folks had to say this week.
And I would like to know who is fighting for the American people's civil rights. Because we have a right to have our civil rights, and no one has the right to violate the American people's civil rights.
I had one question, wondering why we see in China all the sterilants, the soldiers out with the spray, washing buses, washing streets, washing storefronts. But we don't see this in the USA. Wondering what the deal is.
I am just sick and tired of people being stupid. Stay y'all in the house and enjoy your family. This is the time that your husband won't be running around cheating all on you, because guess what? It's a lock-in. He can't go nowhere.
Here's that number again, 888-601-0032. Again, toll free. Pick up the phone. Let us know what you're thinking. This is your time to be heard, folks. Also, follow me on Twitter at Eric Bolling, all one word, and ericbolling.com. And make sure you tell us, and we'll make sure they hear you. Each week, we take your questions directly to the experts. Emergency medical physician Dr. Todd Dorfman is back with us. Thank you for joining us again, Todd. Let's get right into the questions. Mark Wilkerson on Facebook wants to know, I'm walking around without a mask and walk by someone that has COVID-19. Will I automatically catch it without coming into contact with that person? In other words, I think he's trying to say is how airborne is it now, if at all, and will a mask save him even if it is? Doc.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. There has been a lot of information coming out recently about this particular virus being potentially spread in an airborne way, similar to measles or chickenpox. However, the infectious numbers don't really point us in that direction. So it still is a droplet spread disease as far as everyone knows. Each person who has the disease infects probably 2 to 2.5 people if they're in the same room with those people. Being outdoors is much less of a risk, certainly. If he's exposed to someone who actually has corona and he walks past them, it's frankly fairly unlikely if he's 6 or 10 feet away that he would ever get the virus. If they were closer to him and they coughed on him or sneezed on him and didn't have a mask on and he didn't, then that's a higher likelihood.
All right. Lori on Facebook asks, when it comes to the antibody tests, does it show if it's active in your body at the time of test and or if your body has immunity to the virus? And if you show immunity, what are the chances of getting it again? This is the $64,000 question that everyone seems to want to know. Once you have it, can you get it again? What's the latest, Doc?
Yeah, that's a terrific question, and you're right, everyone wants to know the answer to this. So the way I describe your immune system to people is, the analogy is it's like your memory. Some of us have lifelong memories, we'll never forget those things, they are vivid in detail, and that's sort of like a measles vaccine where you have lifelong immunity. Other memories, you forgot what someone told you last week potentially and have very short memories or a very short cycle of antibodies. We see this in a childhood virus called RSV, respiratory syncytial virus. The same child can actually get that virus several times in a season. We see chickenpox being an excellent vaccine with almost lifelong immunity. So it really depends, and no one knows the answer. And the other thing I want to point out, Eric, is that even if you do have immunity and it is effective to prevent you from getting the disease, it doesn't mean that you can't harbor the disease in your nose or throat or lungs. And just because it's not making you sick, maybe you could spread that to other people. That piece is unknown, and that really doesn't have much to do with the immunity piece.
Oh my goodness. All right, well, a quick question on Facebook comes from Facebook. The question is, how can we better prevent future outbreaks? I got about half a minute, Doc. What's the best way?
Yeah, this is a tough question. I mean, the only way, honestly, to prevent an outbreak like this that catches us blindsided is to do what we did, which is stop the spread of disease. You have to either create herd immunity, that is immunity to the entire population, and you can do that by getting everyone vaccines that are effective, or by getting everyone the disease. You know, like in our era, we had chickenpox parties when we were kids, and everyone would get immunity to the chickenpox. So the bottom line is it's very difficult, and we're most likely going to have to do what we did, which is prevent the spread if something like this happens again.
Dr. Todd Dorfman, thank you. I almost forgot your name. See that? See, you tell me about, I remember when I fell off my bike when I was 5 years old and skinned my leg, but I almost forgot your name. Dr. Todd, just kidding, love you, sir. Good to have you back. Dr. Todd Dorfman.
Great to be here. Thanks, Eric.
Ahead on America This Week, a terrifying threat has landed in the U.S. Why they're being called murder hornets and where they've been found. And more people are adopting our four-legged friends to help them cope with the pandemic. Next, the new warning from the Better Business Bureau and what you need to know to protect yourself from thieves.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, America. United we stand. United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, America. United we stand. Ready to help, ready to serve. It takes everyone with steady nerves. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, America strong. City by city, state by state, town by town, stand American great. Everyone stands American strong. When strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, America. United we stand.
You know, as if 2020 hasn't been bad enough thanks to the coronavirus, there's now a new horror that's landed in the U.S., and it's nicknamed the Murder Hornet, and rightfully so. Kara Kostanich with Sinclair Station Como in Seattle has the details on this beastly bug.
And experts say these hornets typically aren't aggressive towards humans, but they will sting. We're talking about an insect that is more than 2.5 inches long, that is longer than my index finger.
So this is a yellow hornet, and this is actually an Asian giant hornet.
More than 2.5 inches long, the potentially lethal Asian giant hornet has been discovered near Blaine and even north of the border.
We don't know how extensive the infestation is right now.
It's also not known how this creepy and invasive species arrived in the U.S. from Japan or Korea. There have been 2 verified reports in Whatcom County. The State Department of Agriculture is working to find, trap, and eradicate the pest.
We're hoping that the traps will actually trap those queens, because that's one less queen that can have their own hive.
The hornet has a painful sting and can kill a human if stung too many times with its large amount of venom. It also has an appetite for the honeybees that pollinate important Northwest crops like apples, blueberries, and cherries.
We don't know what impact it's going to have on the honeybee population. It could be significant.
Local beekeepers hope the timing of the hornet's life cycle will spare our critical honeybees.
The colonies that are moved into Whatcom County for pollination are done in the spring, whereas the damage from the hornet is done in the fall.
By that time, commercial crops should be done flowering. Right now, experts believe the Asian giant hornets are becoming active with the arrival of spring here in a new place where they are not welcome.
We're going to be a lot better off if we eliminate this pest as quickly as possible.
I am told that everyone's body reacts differently to the venom of this hornet. If these insects are established, I'm told they will show up in other states across the country. In Seattle, I'm Kara Kostanich for America This Week.
With so many people staying home because of the coronavirus, a lot are now getting pets for companionship, but scammers are eager to take your money and break your heart. April Molina with Sinclair Station KABB in San Antonio explains.
It is easy to fall for a face like this, even if it's just through pictures on the internet. Right now, many of the shelters aren't as full as they normally are, so people are turning to the internet to find that new furry family member. But who can you trust? The Better Business Bureau says they've seen a 10% increase in pet scams since the coronavirus outbreak. Michelle Rakow is one of those victims. She was trying to buy a teacup Yorkie. Michelle found a website with a matching Facebook page and everything looked legit.
They have a video on there of the recipients of the puppy, like a happy ending story. And then they also were saying on the website that, this was their passion and it's a family business. They've been doing this for a long time.
She emailed the breeder a few times and ended up sending them more than $1,200. The next day, when they were supposed to ship the puppy, she received another email saying the shipping company required a special crate because of the COVID-19 pandemic. That would be another $900. Michelle decided to call the shipping company herself, only to find out that they aren't even shipping pets at this time.
The shipping is where many of the cons end up because they're either trapped at an airport or a shipping facility needing additional payment. They need more insurance. They need food. They need a new crate. Many people end up getting caught right there.
Jason Mesa with the Better Business Bureau says there are a couple things you can do to avoid becoming a victim. Stay on, communicate, and even pay through the platform where you saw the ad. It's always best to visit a breeder when buying a pet, but right now that may not be an option for some. You can ask for a live video chat with the breeder and the pet at the same time. For America This Week, I'm April Molina.
Every week we honor first responders who died in the line of duty protecting our great country. Paul Novicki, a Michigan paramedic and former fire lieutenant, died from complications due to COVID-19 last month. Novicki had been a first responder for 32 years. He leaves behind his wife, children, and stepchildren. New York Fire Department EMT Gregory Hodge died from coronavirus last month. Hodge was 59 years old and also worked on the World Trade Center recovery effort following the 9/11 terror attacks. He was with the New York Fire Department for 24 years. Rest in peace, officers.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, America. United we stand. Ready to help, ready to serve. It takes everyone with steady nerves. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, American strong. City by city, state by state, town by town, stand American great. Everyone stands American strong. When strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand America. United we stand. We stand America. United we stand.
Well, over the last 8 weeks or so, we've tried to highlight the plight of American businesses, the difficulty they're having with the coronavirus. We've been to several restaurants, we've been to a doctor's office, but what I've noticed over the course of this time is one of the most important services, goods and services to people in America are the hair salons, the nail and hair salons. So I wanted to come to Haven Salon in Charleston, South Carolina. The owner, Joanna Jacobs, Joanna, well, thank you for having us, first of all. Second of all, tell us what the state of affairs is with your business, small business in South Carolina.
It's very, very scary right now. It's terrifying. We're not quite sure where we are as far as whether or not we're going to be reopening or if once we do reopen, if it will be able to sustain.
Is there a possibility you won't reopen?
There is definitely a possibility.
Tell us why.
Well, my employees are completely struggling. We work off of commission. It's been 6-7 weeks now that we have not gotten any paychecks. My employees haven't received anything. We've applied for business loans. It's been weeks and weeks of dealing with going through the government and going through the banks and trying to get questions answered, sending in information, and we still haven't received any funding to this date.
And you are a local person. You grew up
I am.
in this
I've
area.
lived in Charleston my entire life, my
Grew up
whole
in the
life.
area.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place to be.
Yeah. And not an uncommon story. Not an uncommon story at all. But we want to say thank you very much. And we wish, well, look, folks, get out there. Go support your local businesses. If you live in a community, you see a hair salon like this or a restaurant, go support them. Get a gift certificate. If you can't get a service, good or service right now, get a gift certificate. Am I right?
Absolutely. We are doing gift certificates. We are prepaying for upcoming services. We are selling products. Anything in the near future that you need.
Joanna Jacobs, owner of Haven Salon, South Carolina. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Before we go, here's something that caught the attention of America this week. Meet 5-year-old Adrian. He's an ambitious little boy who took matters into his own hands after his mom said she wouldn't buy him a Lamborghini. Adrian snagged the keys to his parents' Dodge and went for a drive on the interstate in Ogden, Utah. The Highway Patrol pulled Adrian over about 2 miles away from his home. Now, little Adrian told the trooper he was headed to California to get his dream car, a Lamborghini. Now, since his story went viral, offers are now pouring in for Adrian to sit and ride in Lamborghinis. Be like Adrian, folks. Don't steal cars, but be ambitious enough to take action and dream big. Thanks for joining us for another America This Week, and a special thanks to Haven Salon for hosting us. These are the businesses that are important. They need you now more than ever. Now, we have something special to end the show with tonight. Wes Tank is a performer and has gone viral for his rap performances. He combines the classic Dr. Seuss books with Dr. Dre beats, and the results are nothing